New Year. What better way to celebrate the end of one year and the beginning of a new one than getting absolutely blackout drunk, then waking up to a New Year's sunrise, freezing cold, with the worst stinking hangover imaginable. But as this year draws to a close and a new year and indeed a new decade approaches, I find myself wondering, where exactly did New Year come from? When did we start celebrating it? And so, to answer this question, I have done some digging. Because we all know roughly how your usual holidays, Christmas, Hanukkah, etc., whatever you believe in, came to be, but how did New Year's get here? It's a little lesser known, but today we're going to dig into it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen across the world, and welcome back to the Grand Portfolio. And today we're discussing how New Year's came to be, how long it's been celebrated for, and just to finish off, we'll go into the wacky traditions that come from all around the world. Some are far more mysterious than others, so strap yourselves in and get ready, because here we go. And just on a side note before we begin as well, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content like this. And don't forget to give us your opinions and any ideas down in the comments for things that I should do next. But without further ado, let's dive into the history, the culture, and the general nitty-gritty of what New Year's truly is. But before we delve into any weird and wacky traditions of what is generally the most universal holiday there is in the world, let's see about where this began. Well, when it began, New Year's Eve, or New Year's, is not the same as you'd look at it today. In fact, New Year's, from what we know, appears to be far older than the generic holidays that are celebrated normally around this time of year. For example, Christmas and Hanukkah. This, in fact, comes from evidence found within Mesopotamia. There is evidence to suggest that New Year's celebrations have been celebrated as far back as circa 2000 BC, so around about the time of the Akkadian Empire. This holiday is possibly one of the oldest there is. Well, the oldest one that's still celebrated as widely as it is today. In fact, every single country on Earth celebrates New Year's Eve. Unless you're in North Korea, it gets a little bit weird, but hey ho, there you go. Now, you've heard the stories that ancient civilizations always generally had some kind of festival celebrating the return of spring, trying to cheer themselves up in the middle of winter when everything looked pretty damn bleak and you were just struggling to feed yourselves. People such as the Celts, for example, had their own holiday in the winter time, as did the Romans, in order to try and cheer themselves up in the middle of winter, give thanks to the gods for their recent harvests, and try to welcome in and encourage the coming of a new spring. New Year, it seems, was celebrated in conjunction with all of this. The earliest recorded New Year's celebrations, in fact, were not celebrated in January as we know them today, but by our calendar, roughly during the time of March, or rather the spring equinox, during the last days of winter and the first days of spring. So you could say circa around the end of March, beginning of April, is when the ancients celebrated New Year, because it was finally the end of those long dark nights, the freezing bitter cold, and finally time to plant new crops and set up for a new harvest. More food, because who the hell can't say no to that? From what we know about the Mesopotamian celebration of New Year is that it centres mainly around their religion. By this, I mean it has been found that Mesopotamian celebrations of the New Year centred around sort of March time during the spring equinox, and had to do mostly with the victory of the sky god Marduk over the sea goddess Tiamat. This is where it gets a bit nutty, however, because these days our celebrations during the holiday season tend to only last maximum about 2 or 3 days. This particular ritual and celebration in Mesopotamian times, however, lasted for 11 straight days. That's right, 11 days of non-stop partying. Blimey. And I thought my Boxing Day hangover was bad. 11 days. Damn, imagine having a hangover for each day of partying. Whew, does not bear thinking about. But I hear you wonder, how did we make the transition from New Year's being celebrated in March to being celebrated in January as we know it now by our calendar? It's to do mainly with something called the lunar calendar. Now, in astronomical terms, we have both a lunar calendar and a solar calendar, two calendars of which tell the time very differently. The lunar calendar, for instance, places the new year around the end of March, whereas the solar calendar, the one we refer to mainly in our calendars today, places New Year roughly at the time when we celebrate it now. Ergo, when the Earth completes a full orbit around the Sun, 365¼ days in total, and every 4 years, of course, a leap year, 366 days, in order to make up for the fact that every year we shave off a quarter of a day of our calendar, because that would just be a nightmare. Can you imagine? One day a year, you're in work, you're in the office for just a couple hours more? It's a stretch already. To discover why New Year made the transition from March to January, from the lunar calendar to the solar calendar, we have to take a trip now to the time of the Roman Empire. Well, when the Roman Empire was just taking its first steps. That's right, we're paying a visit to Julius Caesar. More specifically, in the year 46 BC. Now imagine, 46 BC. Caesar has just conquered the Gauls. He has just declared himself dictator for life, and the Senate's not very happy about that. But despite that, being a brand new dictator, Julius Caesar set about changing pretty much everything. Calendar and date of New Year included. So Julius Caesar made the transition of the Roman calendar not to follow the lunar calendar, but instead to follow that of the solar calendar. However, this is different and unique, of course, if you're in China, who still use the lunar calendar to this day, and it is why every year Chinese New Year falls on a different day of the year. It's confusing, but now you know why. Now, back to Caesar. So in 46 BC, an astronomer by the name of Sosigenes convinced Julius Caesar to honour the solar calendar instead of the lunar one. This is due in part to the fact that January, the first month of the year for many parts of the world, derives its name from the Roman god Janus. Now, the Romans, Julius Caesar included, had a bit of an unhealthy obsession with achieving something known as the Pax Deorum, or the peace of the gods. And in their religion, it was important to appease the gods in any way possible. Do anything to get on any god's good side no matter what. Because like with Sumerian gods such as Enlil, crikey, these guys are irritable as hell to say the least. So in order to achieve optimum Pax Deorum, Sosigenes convinced Julius Caesar to abandon the use of the lunar calendar and instead rewrite the calendar completely, naming many of the months of the year after Roman gods, such as Janus. Now, Janus is placed at the beginning of the year because in particular, he is known as the god of transitions, of new beginnings, of gates and borders. And in Roman myth, this particular god is depicted strangely enough as having two faces, one looking in front of himself and one looking behind, as if keeping one face on the future and one face looking towards the past. Because at the end of the year, it's customary around the world to reflect on the past year, what you've done, good and bad, and again have optimism towards the future, towards the coming year. So it's rather fitting, don't you think, that the Roman god Janus, depicted in this way, would be perfect for the beginning of a new year and a new calendar. And so there you have it. That's where our month of January comes from. Rome, everybody, putting Shakespeare and Dickens to shame since 753 BC. But now that I've most likely pissed off the ghost of Julius Caesar, let's move on and look at some of the weird, wacky and wonderful traditions that countries around the world adhere to during this universal celebration of a new year. Let's begin with the land of the rising sun in the east, Japan. Now, Japan, with Buddhism playing a significant role in its New Year's celebrations, Buddhist temples across the country adhere to the custom of ringing their bells 108 times to welcome in the new year. Now, this beautiful melody, with such a specific number, 108 tolls the bell, is said to represent the 108 sins in the Buddhist way of life. It is believed that undertaking this act cleanses people of the previous year's sins, so that they may enter the next year with a clean slate. In my opinion, what a beautiful way to start a new year. Imagine that. It's night time, you're in the Japanese countryside, and suddenly you hear the tolling of bells from temples all around. That must be a beautiful melody. But now, let's head further west. Let's follow the direction of the rising sun across the world as we come to Denmark. In this happy little country, there exists a strange yet no less interesting custom around New Year's. For the Danes, it involves smashing up plates and crockery, specifically on their neighbours' doorsteps. That's a health hazard if ever I heard it. But interestingly enough, the custom goes in Denmark that the more smashed crockery you have on your doorstep come New Year's Day, the luckier you shall be in the new year to come. Isn't that strange? Well, for me at least, but not for you in Denmark if you're listening. But still, what better way than to vent any past anger from the previous year by giving your crockery and plates a good old smash on your neighbour's doorstep? If that sort of thing happened where I live, the police would get called out an awful lot more times than they usually do on this universal of holidays. Now, continuing our journey, instead let's head further south to Africa, more specifically South Africa. And if you're one of those people who treasures their iPhone or iPad or their MacBook, you may want to put this on mute for a couple of seconds. For their New Year's tradition is to throw old appliances out of their windows, representing the adage, out with the old and in with the new. Unique, very unique. Yet if you ask me, expensive. Still though, each to their own. And unique is good. I mean, a world without any uniqueness or diversity is like a pizza without its topping. What would you have then? A bread frisbee? Anyway, moving on. We head further east, across the Atlantic now, to South America. More specifically, Peru. A nation synonymous with mystic tales of ancient cities in the clouds and the empire of the Inca. But for the sake of this video, with yet another wacky New Year's tradition. Now brace yourselves for this, and if you ever go to Peru, you could put your boxing gloves to good use. For in one Peruvian village, it is a New Year's tradition to engage in fist fights. Yes, you heard me right, fist fights. And I am being deathly serious here. But there is a significant meaning behind it. The fist fight itself represents people putting aside their differences from the previous year, so that then, when the chimes signal the New Year's arrival, people have a clean, fresh slate to start off the year, without feelings of violence towards one another. They got that out at the end of the previous year. So why hold that in the new year? Man, this world is a stranger place than ever I thought. Just makes me want to explore it all the more. But what kind of traditions do you guys like to partake in? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and to subscribe for more content. For now though, I wish you all the happiest of holidays, and a very happy and successful new year. For now though, it's time for me to sign off and go and get blackout drunk with everybody else. I'm Lewis of the Grand Portfolio, signing off, and a very happy new year to all of you.